Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with Mark Ostrander. We are weighing in. We're brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Let's start out with Grant Turner is in Tokyo doing big time things. Mark's finally on social media, so he can actually see some of the cool stuff that Grant's doing. And I told you, it's like being on social media is cool. It's a way to kind of follow what people are doing without having to text them or call them every day. And they're putting out new shoes and all the different sports that they cover, the combat sports like boxing and fencing and things like that. And GT hasn't said so, but I feel like some new wrestling shoes might be dropping. That it feels like that's what they're leading up to.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
the social media thing, David. I think I'm following well over 100 people right now, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I think I have 8 people following me.
What's your handle?
Ostrander 12.
No Mark, just Ostrander 12.
I think Ostrander 12.
All right, give Mark a follow, okay, guys. He's integral part of the show. Smart guy, has some pearls. He'll start dropping if he can get up to at least 100 followers. So let's get him going. Anyway, all right. Hey, lots to talk about here. Okay, let's talk about the portal first. Okay. Two things happened at Arizona State. You just told me this. We're recording this at 9:30 on Monday evening. If people can't tell, I'm a little bit under the weather. I haven't been sick in 2 years, which I credit a large part to getting my diet right and exercising. Can't keep us down. We're going to rise and grind. That's what we do. So portal, Trey Munoz from Arizona State goes in the portal, and Soriano goes in the portal. I think most people understand that Soriano's training out at Sunkist Kids, excuse me, in Arizona State. So now I'm getting a text that says he's not actually in the Munoz isn't actually in the portal yet from a member of the staff. So, but anyway, so I mean, literally, I just got that text as we're speaking. So let's talk about Soriano. Okay, so Soriano's in the portal. What do you think that does? Because he has a do not contact, which is super interesting.
That is interesting. I have not seen one athlete say do not contact. So he's going to decide what he wants to do. He doesn't want any pressure, which I can understand. When you're a caliber wrestler like he is, he can pick and choose where he wants to go, what's best for him, with 1 year of eligibility left. We kind of talked about this earlier, David, and we kind of have difference of opinions, which is kind of what's neat about this program, and what's neat about our relationship is that we don't always agree.
Sure.
You think he'll probably end up at 25, and you think that makes sense to try to, do something really big there by taking maybe a 3-timer out.
To stop Spencer Lee from winning 4. Yeah. I think that would be the most epic thing he could do.
Yeah. And I'm not disagreeing with you that may be what he does, but when you're a returning national champ at 33 and you've beaten everybody in that bracket, I don't know. I think I would want to go out on top, being the best 33 pounder in the country, and then drop down to 25 for the Worlds and, the next cycles that are going to be happening in the next 3 years. But then I don't know what he weighs walking around. You said they told you he walks around about 133, somewhere around there?
Yeah, he walks at low 30s. So the very first podcast we did of Matt Chat, when we came over to USA Wrestling, Lee Pritt set it up where we had Perry, Zahid, and Soriano. Yep. And I think you actually watched, you watched most of them, but you actually called me right after that one and said, man, that was really cool. And Soriano's a very interesting dude. He doesn't do a lot of interviews. That was a super favor from Lee. He's a super respectful kid, and he just approaches the world a little bit differently. I think he's ranked 2 in the preseason at either weight, right? He's ranked 2 behind Spencer Lee, or he's ranked 2 behind Roman Bravo Young, right? Like, you have to give the defending champ from this past year the number 1, right?
I'm not sure about that, David. I think because he was training for the Olympics, he's won international tournaments. He's a returning national champ. It was a shortened year. I'm not so sure. If I was ranking, I would not rank him number 1. I think I would. So
I would rank RBY 1.
I'd probably rank Soriano 1.
Yeah.
But wherever he goes, David, it's going to be an interesting scenario.
Yeah.
Either 125 is going to be a barn burner like we've never seen, or 133 is going to be a barn burner, which we've never seen. So I think either way he goes, it's going to be fun to see what happens. I just think he'll probably go 33. And that's just my gut feeling. And I could be wrong. You know, like we say at the beginning of these podcasts, these are our opinions. Sure. And we'll talk about some other things that are really my opinion later on in this podcast. And people may not agree with me, but it's just what I think at the time. Until something else happens, you know, I'm going to go with what I think.
Yeah. To me, Suriano seems like a climb the highest mountain kind of kid. You know, like, I mean, he's trying to make the Olympic team. He's trying to be an Olympic champion. He's already won the nationals. I think him winning a second national title, while most of us would give our left ear for that, I think he wants to beat a Spencer Lee, almost cynically, a Spencer Lee, like, stop this guy, you know, from accomplishing history. You know, like all these Iowa kids are getting these NIL deals with Ironside's company, like Spencer's got one, Ironman's got one. And so I think that the most hype that Suriano could get would be wrestling Spencer Lee, not wrestling RBY. And so that's why I think we'll bet chicken wings on it, you know, so it's fine. So
you going to pick a winner now?
No, wait.
Okay. Oh, do you want to pick a winner if he goes 25 or 33?
Let's figure out what weight he's at first. That's the first bet. That's the first wing bet. Okay. So anyway, all right. So let's talk about.
Oh, one other thing, David, we have not said that we probably need to say. Deacon has already
coming back.
That he will be back next year at Northwestern. So that's
good.
Wrestled at 70, so it looks like he's going to be 158 again. So that's 157. So that's great news for Northwestern. That's going to help their program, and it'll be fun to see him wrestle again.
Yeah, and it's good because the national tournament wasn't going to be very good this next year, so it got better.
Well,
no,
we were kind of worried about we were a little worried about 157 because a lot of guys have left and went up.
It's still not. It still might be the shallowest weight, even with him, you know. But it obviously makes it deeper for sure.
It will be better. Yes, it will be better that he's there.
Obviously, tongue planted firmly in cheek when I said the NCAA tournament needs to get better. In case anybody didn't catch the sarcasm. Okay, so let's talk about Mark Emmert, the director of the NCAA. He said something that I think just kind of slid by the goalie with a lot of people because of the OU Texas thing and Fargo and Cadet Worlds. He said the NCAA may decentralize. I think we're not going to take a whole podcast on this, but this is a 45-minute conversation.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
So I think what people need to understand is this. I was talking to a good friend of mine today whose son was a double Fargo All-American this weekend. And we were just talking about it. And I said, this would be like if the dad makes $20,000 a year and the son makes $100,000 a year. The son's going to be like, why am I listening to you? Like, you know, like part of your father, part of why your kids listen to you is because you put a roof over their head and you put clothes on their back and food in their mouths. And if they can do all that without you, you don't have a lot of power. So the NCAA is basically supposed to be policing things and making things fair, right? And I just said to my buddy, I go, does anybody think the NCAA is doing a good job at that? I think the answer is no. Like these teams are in multiple sports are getting caught all the, you know, like it's blatant what's going on at certain schools. So if the people that are supposed to be regulating it are not regulating it, and all they're doing is just taking money to not do their job, kind of just makes sense to get away from them. Football's already done it. Okay, so like football, the BCS system, that doesn't go through the NCAA. The basketball tournament is the cash cow for the NCAA. And there's two other national championship events that are actually profitable for the NCAA. One is the College World Series, and the other one is the NCAA Wrestling Championships. Obviously, the Wrestling Championships we're probably not as profitable or profitable this year because of 25% attendance, but in normal years, they crush it. Any of us that have ever been there knows they sell tickets out in like 45 minutes. So in the College World Series, apparently is the same way. I got buddies in Omaha. It's like you can't get a ticket unless you know somebody. So I think it's very possible that these schools just get together and say, okay, like, we're going to hire some guy to be, maybe it's just like the SEC commissioner and the Big 12 commissioner. Like these guys are all governing their own teams. I mean, basically, it's a free for all anyway, right? Like teams are cheating and teams are still using RTCs to pay kids in our sport. I mean, football is rampant with it. The NIL is going to actually get rid of a lot of the cheating because now you can pay these kids legally. And so then it's like, why do we need them? I mean, but you have kids that literally, when they go to the draft, they can't read and they graduated. They shouldn't have graduated from high school.
True.
Okay, like they can't read.
I mean, we don't know if they can't read. They have trouble speaking, but
okay, they can't speak coherently. Yeah. How about that? They can't form 4 sentences in a row with any words that have 3 syllables or more.
Yeah, which is a shame.
Yes, but both sides of the systems are using each other, right? Like the school is using the kid as cheap labor, and the kid is not, he could try to go to class. I mean, he could try to learn, but they're just going to pass him either way. I'm like, you go back to Dexter Manley, he graduated, he was signed his contract with an X. He couldn't write his own name. I mean, I think there's a lot of kids that are like that just don't make it to the NFL. So, I mean, I just think, so this whole decentralizing thing, I told my friend, I go, I think in 10 years, this whole thing's going to look entirely different. Okay. And again, what people need to understand is wrestling doesn't matter to the NCAA. This is all about football and basketball. Okay. Because that's their cash cows. Yeah. Wrestling loses money at almost every school. So, I mean, I think there's 2, maybe 3 where they don't. So, and because people are like, well, this much, money comes in, I'm like, well, they got recruiting budgets. They got uniform costs. They have travel budgets. A lot of these coaches are making a truckload of money. There's a lot of coaching staffs where the head coach is making $200,000-300,000 grand and the assistants are making all $100,000. I mean, you're talking about $1 million budget. And so you can kind of go, yeah, okay, well, if there's 35 kids and 10 of them are on scholarships, 25 are paying, but that 25 that are paying, that's not at zero. That's not all profit because the teachers and stuff got to get paid out of that. Sure. I mean, and I don't think anybody wants to listen to an economics lesson on this. I mean, that's not our role here, but I'm just saying it's complex. So, and that ties directly to Oklahoma University and Texas formally announcing that when their TV contract is up, they want to leave the Big 12 for the NCAA. And that's going to happen in 2025. Now, I don't know if that's January 1 of 25. I don't know if that's the beginning of the 25-26 school year. I don't know how that works. I'm assuming it's the beginning of the 25-26 school year because it would be crazy that the fall sports play in one conference and the winter spring sports play in another one. Like that would be absolutely nuts. But so, Texas obviously doesn't have wrestling. So OU is now in the same scenario that Missouri was when they moved to the SEC. Yep. So when you think about OU, where do you think they would end up? I've got 3 theories.
Where would they end up?
Yep.
Probably back in the, that's kind of hard to say because 2025 is a long ways away, David. And a lot of things are going to change from now, 2021 till 2025. I think what's going to happen is we're going to have, and this is just my opinion, like I want people to understand. I think we're going to have 3 super conferences, and that's all we're going to have.
I think we should have 4.
Okay, I'm not saying we shouldn't have 4. I think we're going to have 3.
Well, here's the reason why I think 4, because they're pretty evenly distributed. So here's my suggestion. First of all, let's talk about, I think OU ends up either in the Big 12. The argument for there is they get to stay like Missouri did, the MAC, because that's what Missouri did, or the Pac-12, because they're kind of a Western school and they need teams. This was my proposal. I wrote this up and I didn't think it would get traction, but I have it. It's literally in our Google Doc, Mark.
Yeah.
Conference 1, Big 12, Pac-12. Okay.
Okay.
So basically everything West. Conference 2, Big 10. Conference 3, EIWA. Conference 4, SoCon, MAC, ACC.
Okay.
Then you take those 4. I would probably do it top 6 at each qualify, 9 wild cards.
Okay.
What that does is it gives the NCAA or each of these schools an opportunity to have a big TV kind of tournament. Like the ACC wrestling was great this year, but it was like a 6-man bracket. Like if you're the 1 seed, you wrestle 1 match, you're in the finals. It's not really good preparation. I remember when the Big 12 was 4 teams, it was a quad. Now the Big 12 is cool. It's 12 teams in 2 days, and it's on ESPN and, that kind of stuff. So, but this is going to change things. And OU is the best football team in the conference. Texas is supposed to be really good, but they've been garbage forever. So the other thing that I know from talking to Brian Smith years ago is that the non-wrestling schools get to vote on whether the school gets to stay in the conference for wrestling. Because he said why Mizzou didn't get to stay was like Kansas State, Baylor. Those schools all said no.
Yep.
So, but they let them back in. So maybe they would let them in, in a couple of years. But like you said, the world could change in 4 years, right?
Yep. I think what's going to happen, David, is I think the Big 12 is going to be done. I do not think there's going to be a Big 12.
I think it's going to dissolve.
It's going to dissolve. I don't think the Pac 12 is going to pick up the Big 12. I really don't. I don't think it helps them. I think they're hurting right now. And I'm just not talking about wrestling, obviously. I'm talking about the 2 major sports in college, which is the money makers, football and basketball.
So where are those teams going to go then if they don't go to the Pac-12?
I think you're going to have 3 major conferences. I think it's going to be ACC. It's probably going to try to get to 20-some teams. SEC is already doing it. They're trying to get to 20 teams. And I think the Big 10 is going to add another 6 teams. And I think they're going to take the elite schools of those conferences. And
what's going to happen to like USC, UCLA, like Colorado, Arizona State, Arizona, like all these schools? That can't happen, Mark. Those teams just can't be without a conference. Like that can't happen.
We'll see what happens.
I think they're
going to go after them, David. I think the SEC will go after them. I think the Big 10 will go after them because the SEC is pushing the other major conferences to do something.
Well, they're not trying to get to 16 teams, though.
Pick and choose all the great teams and have them in one conference. That's going to hurt the other conferences.
I think
the money making conferences.
Teams, though, Mark.
David, the money making conferences right now, the ones that make the most money, are the ACC, SEC, and the Big 10. Those are your big money makers right now.
And you're basing that off of what?
Television rights. They have their own channels. Right now, that's what it looks like to me. And I could be wrong, but what I see right now in those major areas is that, there's always 2 SECs or SEC teams in the Final 4 of the National Football Tournament. More than likely, it's Clemson and Alabama. Pretty much.
Mark. Clemson's not in the
ACC. I'm sorry, but
okay, what I'm saying. So yeah. that changes your whole argument.
Okay. All right.
Clemson's ACC, Alabama's SEC, Ohio State's Big 10, Oklahoma's Big 12. It's usually those 4 teams, and somebody crashes the party once in a while, like Notre Dame or Oregon or somebody like that. But it's usually 3 of those 4 teams every year. So this is what I know. The Big 12 or Big 10, a couple years ago, those teams were getting $20 million a year from that TV contract, the Big 10 network. My understanding is the SEC teams are getting something similar. And I would guess the ACC is getting something similar, but not quite as much because they just don't have as many teams, especially in the revenue sports. I don't think, part of the thing you have to think about too is can these teams afford to join a conference? And here's what you got to think about too. If some of these sports, there's like say wrestling, there's 75 teams. You can't have a conference where you never play the other team or never compete against the other team. So they're going to have some sort of West Coast team. I think the Pac-12 will be the other, they might call it the Big 12. I don't know. But I mean, I think that's going to probably be what happens. But anyway, this is something to keep an eye on. OU really had a good recruiting year this year. They picked up 2 number 1 kids, and the kid out of Pennsylvania at 45 and Piccolo at 95. By the way, shout out to Brian Piccolo. Today's his birthday. But yeah. Okay. So that's something to keep an eye on though. Like that's going to change a lot of things. Like Missouri went and just dominated the MAC, Yep. But we always talked about how it hurt Missouri at nationals and seeding. Like sometimes it hurt them, sometimes it helped them. But when you don't have a lot of top 10 matchups, your results get amplified. The wins are bigger and the losses are bigger. So something to keep.
Just so you understand, David, I don't like the way things are going right now.
Oh, I didn't think that.
I don't like that all these teams are leaving. Big 12 has been a staple for as long as anyone can remember. I mean, it really has been, and I enjoy watching it. And now it's just teams are just leaving to go to make more money.
The business.
I understand it, but it's going to wreck college athletics, is my opinion. It's absolutely going to wreck college athletics.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think that it's survival of the fittest, right? And in general, Darwinism works, right? Like, the strongest people survive. It's why we recruited the best kids. It's why you put 3 kids in a room and they wrestle off and you think the best guy's going to win. So if you follow that theory, then this isn't bad. You have to be consistent with how we approach things. If you want to say it's going to ruin small schools, like small Division I schools, I think that's probably true. I think there'll probably end up being like 48 Division I schools that can compete, and there'll be a bunch more that drop down to D2. I mean, I could definitely see that happening.
Yep.
So, I mean, the one good thing that could happen out of this would be if they formed a super conference out west and asked all those teams to formally get wrestling. So like a Kansas State, a Colorado, a Baylor, those kind of schools would get wrestling. That would be fantastic.
That's another thing that would be a real benefit if we could get some of these schools. But
I think if that happens, if they add 10 schools with wrestling, who the hell cares how they redrew it? That's great. Like, I think, like if Iowa State and one other team goes to the Big Ten, because geographically they're right there, and they go from 14 teams. That's the other thing too. These conferences are all named wrong. Like the Big 10 is the Big 14 and the Big 12 is the Big 10, and West Virginia doesn't belong in the Big 12 geographically. It's nuts. They should be over with the ACC, but that's the deal they made. So
I would love to see Oklahoma State in the Big 10.
Well, that could happen. If they added Iowa State and Oklahoma State. But I mean, there's a lot of tradition out west too. Anyway, we're not going to decide that tonight. So let's talk about Cadet Worlds.
Okay.
So how much of that did you get to see?
I got to watch some of it, David. I guess my biggest thing that I came across, and I was not watching, but when I heard they got second, I'm thinking, how? How is it even possible? I didn't think it was even possible that we got second. I thought we won it. We had 2 champs, 3 seconds, and a bronze. I thought, in Russia struggled at certain weights, so I thought we won it. India won it, which kind of surprised me. But I thought as a team, they wrestled really, really well.
Yeah. Shout out to my guy Luke Lilladau, 48 kgs, silver medalist, beat the Russian first round, made it all the way to the finals. Talked to a couple coaches that were on the trip. Super impressed with him. He's a super impressive kid. He's a St. Louis kid. I wanted to bring this up. His bracket at state this year was freaking insane. Okay. So he won the bracket. Okay. The second place kid is Dragan Arini. Dragan Arini just took 5th at Fargo at 113.
Okay.
The third place kid is Hunter Taylor. He just won Fargo at 106. These dudes are freshmen. This is going to be an all-time epically great bracket. Like, that's a bracket board that you save, and 20 years from now, you're like, geesh. Like those kids in that bracket have probably done more than 98% of the high school brackets that have ever done in their entire lives. And they each got 3 more years to go, plus college.
Yeah.
So I'm a Missouri guy, but shout out to Luke, shout out to Dragon, shout out to Hunter Taylor. Because I mean, Hunter Taylor is a special kid because you go from taking 3rd at state to believing you can win Fargo. That takes a certain strong mentality, you know?
Agreed.
So, speaking of Fargo, did you watch? Well, and the other thing is the girls, and we're allowed to say girls when they're under cadets. Like those are girls, they're not women or ladies. The girls won the Worlds. First time ever.
Yep.
Amazing job.
And you know, that's the thing, David. Women's wrestling, girls wrestling, however you want to say it, is really came on in the last 5 years in the United States. So many schools have picked up wrestling. So many colleges have added wrestling for the women. So it's just so nice to see them wrestling internationally and doing really well. I think it's going to be huge for the sport here in the United States.
Well, anytime you do something that's never been done before, it's a landmark, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, shout out to those kids. I mean, you win it as a team. It's pretty special. And, you know, a bunch of gold, silver, bronze medalists on that team too. So, I mean, all those matches are on, you know, on Arena where you can go back and click on them. And there's some really good ones. So let's talk about Fargo, man. So I'll let you go first because I was there.
Well, you were there. And so I kind of want to get your opinion. I watched a lot of the freestyle, didn't get to see much of the Greco or the girls/women's wrestling. I saw a little bit of it, but not as much as I did the freestyle because I have some connections here in Iowa with some of the kids that were down there. A lot of upsets. And I'm talking big name upsets, which really surprised me, but it just tells you how good some of these kids are getting. And these club teams have really turned the sport of wrestling around in the last 10 years, David. I mean, when we were wrestling, there was no such thing as a club team. We wrestled for our high school. We may go up to the YMCA and wrestle. We may travel to tournaments, but we're traveling with our dad and a couple neighbors and their dad. And that's what we did, you know, and that's how we got our exposure and our chances to wrestle against good kids was to do that. These club teams are taking these guys everywhere, and it's like night and day. David, I don't even think I would have qualified for the state tournament the way these kids wrestle now when I was back wrestling in high school. They're just so much better than we ever were, or than I ever was. I don't want to say you because, you know, that's really not my place. But
you'll do it.
I can do it. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I do have 4 medals from that tournament, but okay. You know.
Congrats.
Yeah. So, I've got a lot of observations. First of all, I'll be selfish. I want to thank Team Missouri. I want to thank Pat Ream, Reggie Burris, Mike Tuck for letting my dad and I be a part of it. I've wrestled in that tournament. I've recruited it. I've scouted it, but I was never a coach. And the only reason I went was my dad wanted me to. He wanted to go and he asked me to go. And you were one of the guys that said go. You know, like the time you have with your dad will be better than whatever amount of money you lost, you know, not going to work. And you're right, you know. So it was a great experience, and like watching the fights with him at night and watching the NBA finals with him and just walking around and talking to people and introducing them to people. And, you know, that kind of stuff was super cool. He has a girl that's wrestled 2 freestyle tournaments in her life, and that was the second one, and she made the blood round. So, you know, that was pretty cool. And, you know, after I watched her wrestle her first match, and my dad goes, "How do you think she's going to do?" I go, "Blood round, coin flip." And it turned out she had a bad draw. She lost to the girl that took second on the front and third on the back. So I think if she'd been in a different spot, she might have placed, but she had 0 criteria. Sure. You know, I mean, she, you know, but she'll grow from that immensely. The Missouri coaching staff was, you know, great to us. It's crazy. Like half those kids have wrestled in my charity meet or trained with us, you know, or, you know, our local all-star meet. So it's interesting, sitting around with them as peers, you know, like grabbing dinner, having a cocktail, you know, that kind of stuff. So it was really fun.
How many
6,000.
All-Americans, how many All-Americans junior cadets freestyle did you have in Missouri?
Terrible. One junior Greco, one junior freestyle, like maybe 6 cadets on each side, junior, cadet Greco, cadet freestyle. I think what hurt us was we had a lot of seniors. I mean, everybody's got an excuse, right? We had some really good seniors that didn't show up, like guys who were banged up, like Ethan Miller, Jack Dara, guys that are really good. And we didn't have a camp, and we didn't have a camp because of COVID, so, I think we're actually going to try to get involved and be more helpful with the camp with the RTC next year. So we're excited about that. I talked to our college coach and, talked to the administration from Missouri, and I think they're interested in that. So, look, I want, like, I sat in the corner for Vinny Zervin, who's from, wrestled for Illinois.
Yep.
I coach Christian Forbes, who's from Oklahoma. I got friends all over the country, but at the end of the day, I'm a Missouri kid. Like when Forbes wrestled Taylor, I just stood behind I put away my coach's pass and pulled out my media pass and just watched the match because you got to be on the 50-yard line,
Sure.
I mean, especially Taylor wrestles for Liberty, and Brewer and Bricker are my guys, like they're my friends. We run events together. They're great people. I'm not going to do that, so, but yeah, I think it's hard to explain the energy in that dome because it's kind of like a big family reunion. It's almost like a wedding. Like somebody described to me one time, a wedding is like 100 2-minute conversations. And it kind of feels like that, like you run into somebody, you talk to them, maybe you grab dinner with them later, but the other thing is you miss a lot of matches, right? Because if you're coaching, there's a giant screen up there and it's got like 16 matches rotating, and you can put notifications on your phone. Like if I want to watch Mason Gibson wrestle, I can make sure I don't miss him. But like the guys at Missouri had it where every time a Missouri kid came up, we were like in this group chat and it would come up. And your primary responsibility is to make sure the Missouri kids are covered, that they have a coach. And we didn't do it where certain kids were assigned to people. I had Colby Warren. He made the round of 16 on the front and the back. I had KJ Miley, who ended up taking 4th in Greco. I had Noah Burke, who I think went 3-2. So, but we didn't have a lot of individual kids. I mean, I sat in for a couple kids, like Trevor Wilson, this kid from Hannibal, who's raw, but really talented and fights hard. And I think that's kind of what you look for at a lot of these tournaments when they don't have great training partners.
Sure.
Is do they have fight, right? Because you can coach fight. You can teach technique. You can't teach heart. So it was really fun. The camaraderie was real. I know it was good because my mom would text me every night and say, your father's having a good time. And
Yeah.
so for people that don't know, like, that's my guy, like, that's my hero. And so, it was great. A bunch of the coaches on the staff were super cool. Like I'm good friends with Jason Keck and Chance Cooper and Jesse Friese and those guys. And so, and it was funny, like Keck's like the buses run the wrong side of the hotel and send you the wrong way. But honestly, like that's when you're part of the team, right? So
I knew you were busy because I called you a couple times. You were at the arena. We'd be talking about something that I thought was important. And you say, hang on, I got to talk to somebody. Hang on, I got to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
So there were people walking by while you were trying to talk to me, and you had to stop so you could talk to them and, do your thing. So, but no, I really enjoyed watching it, David. I thought, there is so much talent in the United States right now. And it starts at the cadets. It probably starts younger than that. I haven't
schoolboys.
I haven't seen all the schoolboys, but my goodness, some of the talent that's coming up in these programs. And I gotta think, David, these club teams has made all the difference in the world with these kids.
Yeah,
it's
like
amazing.
the Chris Owens Club in Idaho, Valiant Prep in Arizona, Pinnacle Wrestling in Minnesota. I don't want to leave anybody out, like Young Guns in Pennsylvania, like
in Iowa.
Wrestling, yeah. And Fellers gave you a shirt, gave you a winner's win shirt, or gave me one to give you. He only had one.
Don't be wearing that.
I would sleep in it. It's a double X, so you're good.
Okay.
I'm on.
Winners win, so I need that shirt.
It's on its way.
Okay.
You're welcome. And the fact that I requested one your size instead of mine probably tells you how good of a friend I am. So, but so many of the guys were super nice, right? Like, and there were just a lot of random coaches that would come up to me and go, "Hey, coach, I really enjoyed the podcast." And honestly, when I first started doing the podcast and then with you, like I talked to you about it every week, like you just wanted to do stuff that smart people appreciated, right? Like I never want to be like the Jerry Springer podcast, right? Like I want to be where like the people that know wrestling are like, I want to listen to Mark, Grant, and David, or I want to listen to whoever David's interviewing in the long form because they're going to discuss good topics. David's going to ask good questions. It's not about me, but just like teeing you guys up and teeing whoever the guest is up. And so when people like that said that's meaningful to me, like Chris Owens gave me a big hug and we were on the Oklahoma USA All-Star team together. He's like, "Man, I'm so proud of you, brother." Like, I meant a lot. Danny Blackshear got picked for the Olympics as an official while we were there.
Cool.
And I'll probably get a little emotional talking about Danny is ex-military. He does border brawl for free. And by free, I mean like he drives in everything, like will not take a dime. And referees, whatever freestyle or Greco matches we have. Danny was the guy that I talked to get ready for the play-by-play for the Olympic trials.
Okay.
And just one of the genuinely good-hearted people in wrestling. I mean, there's a ton of them. Okay, I don't mean to like say he's the only guy, but and I probably got to him second or third and just gave him a big hug, and he was like literally crying. And like, what was so cool was all the other referees that ran up to him, that didn't get picked, right? But like that's the pinnacle for them, right? Like that's because they're not going to get to wrestle, like that's it. That's their thing. So it was super cool. So it's just, I texted with a kid that lost and, he's like, "Coach, I feel like I let you down." I'm like, "You're fine, man." Just the fact that, he said some very insightful things about why he could have done better. I'm like, this alone tells me you're going to be okay. I think sometimes we forget, and I shouldn't say we, but me, because we generally only talk about the super elite things, in a 45-minute podcast. Sometimes we forget the kids that went 3-2, went 4-2, first kid from their school to ever even go to Fargo, those kind of things. First kid to All-American, like take 8th, a lot of times like people will laugh at the kid that took it 8th, but like, that's monumental stuff, and so, I mean, that's a big thing, like KJ Miley is from Thoroughbred Wrestling Academy, and that's a club that's run by Marcus Hayne, who used to do this with me. Marcus is one of the genuinely good people in wrestling in the world, like another guy that does anything I ask him to help us, drops what he's doing and helps us. So, and Miley couldn't be a nicer kid too. And I mean, quick story, like we're working out like the day before, and KJ's like, they're sparring and they're doing like 3-man goes. And he goes, "Coach, who do you think we should get for border brawl?" Like on 30-second goes. And I'm like, "Hey man, don't worry about it. Like we'll figure it out afterwards." And Marcus walks up to me and says, "Hey, that's his way of not overthinking stuff. Like if you tell him just to think about the match, he'll worry himself to death." And Marcus had to leave after the freestyle. And I was his Greco coach, me and Brent Haynes. And that was super helpful because, normally I would have been like, "Let's get focused." Instead, I'm like, "Hey man, what do you think of those warm-ups over there? Who do you think is going to win? Like what do you think about the Cardinals chance?" Just anything. Right.
Yep.
So it was fun. I mean, I would definitely do it again. We had planes, trains, and automobiles where we missed. It was a disaster, but we made it. It was 17 hours in the airport. And
yeah,
so, but it was great, man. Like super great. So shout out.
Are you going to do it again, David?
I think so. Cause I think we'll be able to get more involved on the front end, with the RTC. I think we'll have more kids that are training with us. And I think that makes it more fun. Right.
Sure. Yeah.
And
you get to know the kids. You get to know what you should do and what you shouldn't do with them to get them ready for a match. You're going to see more and more. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I think we'll do that. I feel like that's what'll happen, So, I talked to the Lindenwood coach, on the drive back or the next day. And I'm like, "Hey, I think we should do a camp." He's like, "Let's do it." Boys, girls, whatever, cadets, juniors, just try to do what we can to get back to the sport, you know. So, yeah, shout out to Pennsylvania for winning. California won the girls. Pennsylvania double dipped in the cadets, and I think Illinois double dipped in the juniors.
Yep.
So, you know, I think what Illinois did by sending a bunch of those kids to junior duels, even though they didn't win, they got the rust knocked off. Sure. You know, and they came really deep. A buddy of ours, Matt Collum, who's in Chicago, who's just had a baby. That's why I wasn't on the staff. He's like, it bothers me that we're doing better in Greco than we are in freestyle. I'm like, well, you guys have Medlin running Greco, who's like an Olympic level coach. And I actually got to corner Vinny's Urban 3 matches next to Medlin, and it's really fun listening to him in the corner.
Sure.
Because Medlin's not a rah-rah guy. He's like a high intellect guy.
Yep.
I like talking to guys like that. I've had him on the pod. We're friends, but I mean, it's different seeing a guy in action, you know? So anyway, so we are recording this on Monday, the 26th. Next week, the Olympics will have started. So we'll be talking about
wrestling. We're talking wrestling, correct?
Yes, Olympic wrestling. Yeah.
Right now,
there's right now
on the 31st. Yep.
Yeah. Swimming and gymnastics and a bunch of other stuff are on right now on the TV in the background. But yeah.
Now I got a question. This may be a stupid question, but I'm going to ask anyway, David. The brackets haven't come out yet, have they?
They don't come out till the weigh-in, till people make weight.
Okay. So they'll come out on the 31st for the guys that are wrestling on the 31st.
Each day. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And the other thing is each bracket's a 2-day thing. So if somebody pops positive that was in the semi, like if you and I were in the semi and I pop positive, you're in the finals. So I think that's probably going to happen to somebody. It just seems like statistically that could happen.
Yeah.
So we got like 3 minutes left. And I want to give a shout out to somebody that's been very important to you and me. You don't actually know him, but Mike Willis here at USA Wrestling is moving on. His last day is going to be August 1st. And Mike could not have been kinder to me when we came on in January. You know, taught me how to upload the videos and send them to him. And, you know, just, I mean, he was great. He's like, David, I've listened to your podcast. They're great. And like, he was encouraging, you know, it wasn't like he didn't make it like he had to tolerate us. You know, he made us feel welcome. And you know how that is, Mark. Sometimes you work with people and you feel like they're stuck with you. And sometimes you work with people and you feel like they're happy to have you. And Mike Willis is good as it gets when it comes to that. He told me he's going to stay involved in wrestling, but just do some other things. So big shout to Mike. Mike, I put this on with 2 minutes left in the podcast. There's no way you can cut it for time. You're my guy. GT and I appreciate you, and so does Mark, because we don't get on the air without you. So I don't know if you want to say any last words about Mike before we sign off.
Yeah, I think they've, you know, the whole staff at USA Wrestling, you know, we do it because we enjoy wrestling. We enjoy giving our opinions, trying to give a perspective to people that are listening to us. So, you know, they've just treated us, you know, so well that we got some shirts, we got some gear. So it's fun to do it. And I appreciate everything USA Wrestling's done for us. And Mike's, you know, was the #1 man. He's the one that got it started for us. So
yeah, Gary Abbott was the one that obviously approved it, and then Taylor Miller, Gregorio, but Mike's our day-to-day, week-to-week guy. So Mike, much love, shout out. I know you'll be successful wherever you go. I know people say this, but don't be a stranger when you're at the tournament. Come down and find me and harass me, and let's get some pictures together. So I'm running on fumes here. I made it. So I'm going to pass out, man. Like, I'm super tired. I got this cold, but for Grant Turner and Mark Ostrander, I'm David Mirikitani. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening.
See you next week.